Stalker 2 is undoubtedly one of the most immersive and massive survival games ever made. But how does it compare to the original modded games? Some of Stalker's anomaly mods like Gamma have been iterated on for years to create one of the most immersive and brutal survival experiences around. Today we're going to dig into both games and talk about how different they are in many ways and what the future of Stalker 2's modding could hold. Alright, if you've never heard of Anomaly or Gamma before, in a nutshell, Anomaly is an open source community project based on the first 3 Stalker games. You can play it by itself, but it's also the foundation for hundreds of modern Stalker mods like Gamma. Gamma itself is a collection of hundreds of mods that radically transform Stalker into an even more hardcore survival experience. It's similar to mod packs I've looked at for things like Fallout or Skyrim, but much more in depth and custom made to create a very specific experience. On top of all the graphical and animation overhauls, it introduces dozens of new mechanics like in-depth medical aid, weapon upkeep and customization, plus hardcore mechanics like infinitely customizable difficulty, permadeath modes, and much more. If you've ever wanted an apocalyptic survival game that's free to play and so massive you could spend years mastering it, Gamma is pretty much the gold standard. And in many ways, it was also considered the modern incarnation of the Stalker franchise, that is until Stalker 2 came out. And truthfully, Stalker 2 has really set the new standard for what a modern Stalker game should at least look and feel like. It's using all the latest engine technology, pushing the graphics to the absolute limit, and it has truly phenomenal art direction, some of the best I've ever seen. So how does a community-driven modded experience stack up to an official sequel? So jumping back into Gamma after spending so much time in Stalker 2, I was actually surprised by just how much more alive the world of Gamma feels. This footage here is of me escorting a group of random guys I met at the Rookie Village, which is the original starting area of Stalker 1, to the Dead City, a location built by modders based on cut content. And just meeting this group and then watching how other groups reacted to our presence was completely wild compared to, say, Stalker 2. Having this squad of guys with me made actually surviving Gamma much more bearable. In most games, we think of the NPC aids as sort of visual distractions as we solo our way through a mission, and they provide color commentary. But in Gamma, your party is actually super meaningful. And it's also kind of very much in line with the theme of the book Roadside Picnic and the movie Stalker, which are really about traversing the zone, but with other people. In Gamma, you can actually control your party and decide whether or not you're going to engage in combat. And truly, it felt like I got to actually play one of the most important gameplay loops of Stalker, which is being a guide in the zone. In comparison to Stalker 2, you never really have companions. You do get some NPC friends during quests that'll tag along with you for a while, or maybe you'll stumble into a firefight between 2 factions and then you can pick a side, but the Gamma companion mod just makes the world and the characters in it feel so much more real. I can't wait for a mod like this to make it to Stalker 2. Now, 90% of a Stalker game is traveling from one location to another through this extremely hostile landscape. And one of the things that stuck out to me going back to Gamma was that there was a really high chance I would run into mutants, hostile factions, or a group of NPCs that were even friendly, just going from point A to point B. In Stalker 2, these occurrences will happen, but they don't usually happen unless you take a detour towards something that looks a little more interesting on the map. In one sense, it lets you kind of control your adventure a little bit more, where you go, I hear gunfire off at that compound, so maybe I'll go investigate, but you also have the option to not do anything at all, where in Gamma, sometimes the situations just happen upon you or come right across you more often, and so you feel like you're less in control of your adventure, which I actually kind of enjoyed. In Gamma, there's a real sense of foot traffic and commerce to the zone. And I think this has a lot to do with the older A-Life NPC system that dynamically simulates all of the NPCs going about their lives. But Gamma adds on to this with a even more dynamic economy, fleshed out faction system, and other additions that kind of bring that A-Life system even more to the forefront. Stalker 2's version of this system did get some big improvements since the game launched, but it still feels like the game just kind of spawns random hostile enemies around each each other and kind of activates them when you get close enough. In Gamma, there's a lot more background activity, with Stalker sending radio messages asking for help with missions. Just pulling out your PDA lets you pick from a whole bunch of missions local to you, and they're all given out by NPCs that are just going about their own daily routines. Plus, you can stop and talk to pretty much every NPC, and a lot of them will give you missions right then and there. In Stalker 2, most NPCs just give a couple of lines of generic dialogue and say, go talk to the boss, or aka the mission giver in the area. Now, one of the biggest differences between Gamma and Stalker 2 are the survival mechanics. Everything from repairing guns to healing yourself is a multi-step process that requires having the right gear at the right time and often even being in the right place to use it. The most basic example of this is just healing yourself from injuries. In Stalker 2, if you're hurt or bleeding, you can just apply a couple of bandages, use a med kit, and you're pretty much good to go. In Gamma, first you have to use something to treat your immediate injuries like a bandage, then you need to take post-healing medication like ibuprofen that makes the temporary health benefits of the bandage permanent, and then you need to heal your overall health level by using additional medical items, or you can just stand next to a campfire and slowly regain your health, or you can visit a doctor. Plus, if your head, torso, or your overall health level drops to 0, you die. You can also take side damage that can be lethal. So you kind of have like 4 independent health bars that you have to manage at all times with a complex multi-layered medical system that I have not even gone into the deeper layers of detail with. Now, whether or not you want that level of depth is very much personal. Clearly, Stalker 2 took a much more approachable route to make the game playable by a larger audience, but certainly there's some old school fans that want something that feels a little more real. Now, both games do have a pretty in-depth weapon degradation system. In Stalker 2, weapons degrade with use, and how fast they degrade can be affected by the ammo you use and the weapon upgrades you have installed. And maintaining your weapons and gear is actually a pretty big challenge in the game, and a major component of early and mid-game where you're really having to kind of decide what to spend your money on, getting a cool new gun or maintaining your existing gear. Now, in Gamma, weapon degradation and repairing is basically its own minigame. First, you have to find or repair the individual parts of your weapon using a variety of items to break down other broken guns and combine their parts into new ones for yours. Then you have to install those parts and fix the overall weapon condition using a different set of tools. Oh, and traders don't sell weapons in Gamma, so basically every gun you use has to be looted from a stash or a dead NPC, which often means that they're broken to begin with. And again, I am just scratching the surface of the actual repair system. It is far more complicated. And the cumulative effect of this additional complexity is that every combat encounter you stumble across in Gamma feels like an extremely serious life or death situation. You take a bad hit and start bleeding without the right medical supplies, and you'll be lucky to limp back to a nearby town. And since everything you use also has side effects, simply healing yourself can even lead to you starving or needing to sell off artifacts just so you can afford a can of beans. Now, these complex systems become easier to manage as you get further into the game and more comfortable with it, but man, it is a tough learning curve, especially compared to Stalker 2. Now, I should mention that Gamma as a mod basically exists for people who think the vanilla version of Stalker is just too tame and they want something more hardcore. So I'm comparing kind of the most hardcore version of Stalker to the version meant for the average consumer base. But one of the really cool things about Gamma's brutality is that it actually lines up with a lot of the stories of the zone. Every NPC and character in the zone is talking about how brutal this environment is, and everybody's acting like they're on the verge of death at any time. Yet when you get into the base game, it doesn't quite feel that crazy. But when you load up Gamma, all of a sudden you feel like you're right along with the NPCs there, terrified for your life at every single corner. In Stalker 2, once you get used to the anomalies and how to navigate them, they're not really that big of hazards anymore. You kind of just figure out how to get around them. But in Stalker Gamma, the anomalies still kill you late into the game. Things like radiation are really dialed up to 11. When I was right on the edge of getting to my destination, an emission started, forcing me to find shelter. But of course, the first place I found was irradiated, and it slowly killed me. Eventually, I found a nearby base and hunkered down. But radiation plays a much bigger role in Gamma. When I finally got my squad of travel buddies to their destination, there was a lot of radiation where I dropped them off. So I couldn't really stay long and kind of recoup and figure out what I needed to do next. I had to immediately get out of there and find a safer location. And stepping back from both games for a second, it's kind of wild how different the experience is, even though they're both built on the exact same world and premise. On one hand, I can totally understand how Gamma is way too hardcore to have mass appeal. It would have been silly for the devs to release Stalker 2 with this kind of brutality. But on the other hand, the benefits you gain from the more intense experience makes the gameplay so much more meaningful. Doing a risk-reward mental calculation before heading to an area and deciding that it's actually not worth it to go there is kind of a neat feeling in Gamma. It makes you afraid of parts of the world and think about them as high danger locations that you might want to come back to later if you get really, really good gear or you just want to take a risk. And some of the other updates like the companion mod and the updated A-Life system for Gamma just are clearly superior when compared to Stalker 2. Visually though, there is no question Stalker 2's world is incredible and far beyond what even a heavily modded original experience can achieve. The way the old world has been interpreted for the new engine, the long distance visuals, the seamless loading of the world, the incredible sound design, and the visuals for the anomalies. The game is a 10 out of 10 on the vibe meter. Now, if I was trying to be a cool guy, I'd be like, yeah, Gamma's the way to go, bro. It's so much better. It's way more hardcore. I can't believe you're playing vanilla. But in truth, I think Gamma is a bit too intense for me. The amount of the world that I try to avoid in Gamma is actually so high that I feel like it kind of hinders some of the exploration experience that I like so much in Stalker 2. However, Stalker 2 is just a little bit too tame in some regards, especially once you're fully kitted out in endgame. It doesn't really feel that challenging anymore. Finding a balance between the two games is probably going to be the sweet spot for me, and I'm sure we'll have that in store for Stalker 2's future. The aging framework of the original Stalker games is still incredible, but imagine all of those in-depth mechanics built into a modern game like Stalker 2. The things that GSC didn't push far enough with things like A-Life and risk-reward mechanics, the mods could absolutely improve. At the moment, the modding scene is still in its early days, ramping up with simple stuff like inventory limit modifiers and other quality of life add-ons, but I'd imagine the big gameplay changes are coming soon. I'd be curious to hear your take on this if you've played a lot of Stalker Anomaly or Stalker Gamma and how you think it compares to Stalker 2. I really like Stalker 2 despite it not living up to the original game in certain respects. The visuals, the ambiance, the storytelling are all top tier. And in its defense, we're talking about Anomaly and Gamma because it's had years and years of crafting and modding and community updates to turn it into what it is. So I can only imagine what we've got in store for Stalker 2. If you guys enjoyed this video, don't forget to drop me a like and subscribe for more content like that. Up next, check out my Stalker 2 guide for getting into the game and all the little tips and tricks that I think will make the experience even better for you. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap, signing off.